Lorgar Aurelian's name always comes up when the conversation turns to which Primarchs are the worst. I mean, we all know that he's nearly as hated as Erebus, but is that reputation well earned, or does the Urizen get the short end of the stick? The only Primarch who didn't want to be a general, who didn't even want to be a soldier, Lorgar of the Word-Bearers, was destined to become the most vindicated man in the Imperium, as the entirety of the imperial cult is based on his teachings from his book the Lectitio Divinatus. The Archfiend, the first heretic, and probably the most powerful demon Primarch, Lorgar, is very misunderstood. Not that most people don't know what a terrible, vile villain he is, but most people don't seem to understand just how strong the Emperor's Herald is. Let's put it this way, when Lorgar turned his wrath on Fulgrim, when the War Master summoned the traitor Primarchs to meet for the first time, nobody could step to Lorgar. Not even Horus could stop him. As the War Master put his hand on Lorgar's shoulder, Lorgar commanded him to remove it, and Horus could not stop himself from obeying. Lorgar basically used the voice from the Bene Gesserit in Dune. So we all know that the choir boy isn't a fighter, but he is hella strong in the psychic ways. And there are some major scraps he's gotten into over the years with his brothers and other super being, god-tier beings. And none are worse or more misunderstood than his fights with Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard, the 19th Legion of Space Marines. So let's look at his fight with Corax from the First Heretic. So it's during the drop site massacre, and Corvus is charging the Word-Bearers and wrecking them as hard as he can to buy time for at least some of his sons to escape the treachery and carnage to live and fight another day. It's pretty balls out, and a total Corax move if you ask me. But even though Corvus is Corvus, and he's going totally apeshit on the Word-Bearers, and even though he's not a good fighter and knows he could easily die, Lorgar steps up to fight the Raven Lord. Corax evaded the Crozius without even once parrying. He weaved aside, threw himself out of reach, or fired his flight pack with enough force to boost him up and over Lorgar's heavy swings. By contrast, sweat stung Lorgar's eyes as he desperately blocked each of his brother's attacks. Illuminarum's great hammerhead rang like a church bell as it battered aside the Raven Lord's claws. "What are you doing?" Corax cried into his brother's face as their weapons locked. "What madness has taken you all?" Lorgar disengaged, hurling Corax backward with enough strength to leave his brother unbalanced. The Raven Lord compensated instantly, his flight pack breathing fire and propelling him back at his brother. Bladed wings flashed out at the side, but Lorgar was ready for them. He ignored their scraping, cutting wounds as they knifed through his armor, and focused on hammering Corax's claws aside. In the second safety he brought for himself, Lorgar, at last, landed a true blow. Corax was sent sprawling again as the Crozius pounded into his breastplate. The power field around the Maul's head struck with enough force to send a shockwave blasting out from the warring brothers, throwing all nearby Astartes to the ground. In less time than it took to breathe in, Corax was back on his feet, thrusters firing, spearing at Lorgar once more. "Answer me, traitor!" the Raven Lord grunted. His dark eyes were narrowed at the sickening light that haloed Lorgar. "You were a poor reflection of our father with that psychic gold." Lorgar felt himself slipping back in the mud, his boots grinding across the earth as his brother's strength leaned heavier against him. He couldn't break the weapon lock this time. Both Corax's claws clutched at Illuminarum's haft, burning the handle and the Word-Bearer's hands. "I'm bringing the truth to humanity," Lorgar breathed. "You are destroying the Imperium. You are betraying your own blood." The wildness in the Raven Lord's black eyes was something Lorgar had never even imagined before. Corax had always seemed so taciturn, so devoid of passion, that this warrior lay beneath the albino facade was a horrendous revelation. The claw tips, spitting with crackling power fields, were a finger's length from Lorgar's face now. "I will kill you, Lorgar." "I know," he spoke through gritted teeth, feeling strength bleed from his bones. "But I have seen what will be. Our father, a bloodless corpse enthroned upon gold and screaming into the void forever." "Lies!" The black eyes narrowed, and the Raven Lord's pale muscles bunched, locking harder. "You are reducing a kingdom to chaos, overthrowing the perfect order." Lorgar's gray eyes danced with light despite the strain on his body. The opposite of chaos is not order, brother. It is stasis. Lifeless, unchanging stasis. With a last grunt, Lorgar's strength gave. Quivering hands could no longer keep his brother's weapons back. Here it is, Corax promised in a hiss, his saliva flecking Lorgar's eyes and cheeks. Here is the death you so richly deserve. The claws reached his brother's face. Slowly, the metal burning hot, they sliced over Lorgar's golden skin, inch by inch, blackening the golden flesh, cutting into the meat of his cheeks. Even should he escape, he would bear these scars until the day he died. He knew this and did not care. The psychic fire wreathing them both flared in response to Lorgar's pain. Corax closed his eyes to spare the sight. An instinct cost him his quick victory. Lorgar threw the Raven Lord back again. Illuminarum rose, ready to strike, before a burst of smoky fire launched the Raven Lord up from the soil to come down on Lorgar from above. The word-bearer smashed the first claw aside, striking the fist with enough force to shatter the gauntlet completely. But even as scythe-long claw blades span off into the surrounding melee, the second claw struck home. Meter-long talons sank through Lorgar's stomach, the tips glinting to the side of his spine as they thrust from his back. Such a blow meant little to a Primarch. Only when Corax heaved upwards did Lorgar stagger. The claws bit and cut, sawing through the word-bearer's body. Illuminarum slipped from the impaled Primarch's fists. Those same hands wrapped around Corax's throat, even as the Raven Lord was carving his brother in half. "For the Emperor!" Corax breathed, untroubled by his weaker brother's grip. Lorgar crashed his forehead against Corax's face, shattering his brother's nose, but still he couldn't free himself. The Raven Lord gave no ground, even as a second, third, and fourth headbutt decimated his delicate features. "But he lied to us," Lorgar spoke through lips that produced more blood than language. "Father lied." The claws jerked, snagged against Lorgar's enhanced bones. Corax tore them free, inflicting more damage than the first impaling had done. Blood hissed and popped as it evaporated on the force field blades. "Father lied," Lorgar said. He was on his knees, hands clutched over the ruination of his stomach. Corax's black eyes gave nothing away. He stepped closer, his one functioning claw raised to execute his brother. "Do it!" Lorgar snarled. The psychic wind, the misty fire, all were gone now. He was as he'd always been, Lorgar, the 17th son, the image of his father, the one soul in 20 who'd never wished to be a soldier, and here he would die at the heart of a battlefield. The foul irony of the moment settled on his shoulders, feeling grotesquely apt. He couldn't move his legs. His body was a temple to nothing but pain. He could barely even see his executioner, for his psychic efforts had left him quivering with both weakness and a vision-blurring ache in his mind. A faint outline met his gaze, the blurred image of scythe blades raised high. "Do it!" Lorgar screamed at his brother. The claw fell and struck opposing metal. Corax looked to meet eyes as black as his, and a face as pale as his own. His claw strained against a mirroring weapon, both sets of blades scraping as they ground against each other. One claw seeking to fall and kill, the other unyielding in its rising defense. Where the Raven Guard Primarch's features were fierce with effort, the other face wore a grin. It was a smile both taut and mirthless, a dead man's smile once his lips surrendered to rigor mortis. "Corax," said the other Primarch. "Curse," Corax said the name as the curse it was. "Look into my eyes," said the progenitor of the Night Lord's Legion, "and see your death." So yeah, Lorgar barely makes it out alive, totally eviscerated, guts hanging out. If Curse didn't save him, then Corax would have won entirely. But this is during the Heresy, before either of the Primarchs had ascended. And now, after the Heresy, once Lorgar has become a demon prince of Chaos Undivided, in my opinion, he may just be the strongest Primarch. But as interesting as the fight was in the first Heretic, the rematch we see in the short story Shadow of the Past is that much more. In it we see two veritable warp gods throwing down in a way that is almost reminiscent of the final battles with Horus. There are a few elements of that level of Primarch warp-fueled fury that we saw when Sanguinius faces the War Master. Now, this is the last time we see Lorgar described, and that is not too long after the heresy. Still in Millennium 31, if I am not mistaken. By this point, Lorgar and Corvus have both become so much more than they were the first time they fought one another. And even though Corvus knew this, he goes into the fight thinking of the last time he had Lorgar at the mercy of his blades, guts hanging out, ready to deliver the killing blow. He hasn't let go of that moment and how it made him feel, or how destroyed Lorgar was. Despite getting in a few good licks, the Urizen was wrecked. He's also counting on it being as one-sided as it was before, and Kerr's not being there to stop him from finally ending his corrupted brother. And Lorgar, he's scared, as he should be. He knows that it is likely that this time the Raven Lord will end his life. But he's a total boss and actually a very caring father, so he strides out to meet the Primarch of the 19th in combat and allow his sons to escape the wrath of the Crow Demon. Kind of mirroring how Corax charged some of the Word Bearers to allow some of his Raven Guard sons to survive at Istvaan V. This is no demon, Lorgar raised his rod, beckoning to the blood-stained whirlwind tearing through the last of the Dark Apostle's warriors. Come to me, brother. With a last flurry of activity that turned another legionary to shards of ceramite and ribbons of flesh, the apparition coalesced into a recognizable figure. It was of equal height to the demon Primarch, clad in black breastplate with long taloned gauntlets. A pair of wings stretched from its ornate backpack, fashioned as intricate metallic raven feathers. The face was as pale as snow, gaunt with eyes as dark as coal, framed by shoulder-length black hair. Kalta Ar felt his breath dying in his lungs as he looked up at the unmistakable features of Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard. A flurry of questions flooded his thoughts, but all remained unanswered as Corax spoke. What has happened to you, brother? I have ascended, said Lorgar. He indicated Corax with a twitch of his rod. I might ask the same of you. The Raven Lord strode forwards, intent on Lorgar Aurelian. Kalta Ar and his warriors scattered before him, grateful to be free of his wrath. Marduk and his coterie closed about their Primarch, but a look sent them away. I am what I have always been, said Corax. I am vengeance incarnate. I am justice delivered. This place, beyond the veil, has revealed what we all are. Underneath the veneer of humanity our Father crafted for us, we are of the warp. Have you come to make oath to the powers that are your true creator? No, I swore to destroy all chaos taint from the galaxy. You will be the first fallen brother to die beneath my blades. I am not the creature you fought at Istvaan, said Lorgar, raising his mace. Nor am I. Kalta Ar barely followed the lunge of Corax, so swift it was. A black wind threw him aside as dark fire crackled from the rod of Lorgar. With a thunderous shockwave that hurled the word-bearers to the ground, the two demigods clashed. After a long life of bloodshed and devotion to the true gods, there was little that awed Kalta Ar. The sight of the two Primarchs battling within the empyrean sphere left him shocked and breathless. Infused with the raw primordial force, the combatants were ablaze with power. Corax seemed a towering storm wreathed in white lightning. The cloud formed of multitudinous ravens. Their cawing was deafening, the flash of their talons and beaks, the spark of the tempest. In the shadow, Lorgar rose like a fireball, alight with a tornado of burning rune shapes. Meteoric sigils rained down on the raven tempest, cleaving ember-edged furrows through the dense mass. They slammed into the buildings around the bridge arch, shattering masonry and centering the corpses of Corax's victims. The Raven Lord struck back, hails of flaring claws ripping the air itself, leaving rents through the rune robe of the Urizen. Each stroke left a shriek in its aftermath that shredded the nerves as much as the talons shredded Lorgar's immaterial form. Kalta Ar flinched when the sweeping head of the Word-Bearer's mace slammed into the chest of his storm-wreathed foe. The impact was greater than any thunderclap, leveling the walls around them. Rolling to his back, shattered stone pouring from his armor, the Dark Apostle watched the titanic combatants soar past, Corax with a quartet of gleaming spear talons driven through Lorgar's throat. The Urizen tried to lash out with his mace, but was held close by the Ravenlord's inhuman grip. Together, they crashed to the ground, their impact flattening again the few word-bearers that had regained their feet. "The portal bridge!" Marduk's shout drew Kal'Ta'ar's attention to the wavering energy field within the archway. Dark sparks rippled across its fluctuating surface. It was visibly weakening. "We cannot be trapped here," declared the Dark Apostle, stepping towards the waning portal. "It is sustained by the Urizen's will," declared Marduk, intercepting him. "It means our master is losing his power." The two Primarchs had assumed fully humanoid form again in the heart of the crater their fall had made. Lorgar's left shoulder sagged, his rod swaying low in his grasp. Rune shapes crawled across his form, no longer a robe of office, but forming armored plates etched with warp symbols. Corax flexed claws like sword blades, his expression pitiless as he took a step towards Lorgar. Marduk opened fire. The flare of his combi bolter hit the Ravenlord in the chest and face, a welter of detonations that rocked his stride. Kal'Ta'ar fired his plasma pistol on instinct, the blast hitting Corax in the midriff, splashing cerulean energy across his ornate black warplate. Other fire joined it, missiles and more bolts from Marduk's guard. Lorgar summoned a nimbus of power and threw out a shield of force that lifted Corax from his feet, buckling his wings in the unearthly hurricane. The Ravenlord became a flock once more, of fire-eyed blackbirds, but the swell of Lorgar's will continued to hurl the other Primarchs' incarnations upwards, scattering them to the sky. "Quickly, our lord," shouted Marduk. Lorgar lumbered towards them, his wounds streaming tiny crimson runes like blood. Kal'Ta'ar looked up. The Ravenlord gathered again into a single mass, a dark comet headed directly for them. The Urizen was first through the portal, his massive frame leaving a shadow of his passing as the other word-bearers dashed through after. Kal'Ta'ar lunged the last few strides, throwing himself headlong into the miasma under the arch as chill shade swallowed him. He found himself in a large chamber, colorful mosaic underfoot, the walls covered with fresh murals, white vaulted ceilings, and domes far above. Part of the Templum Inficio. He had no time for his surroundings, eyes drawn back to the gate. Shrieking, the raven flock scratched and pecked, but they could not pass the warp barrier. Lorgar glared at the apparition on the far side, chest heaving as though out of breath, his head crowned with a halo of black warp fronds. Corax assumed his mortal shape again, one cheek bloodied and bruised, his eye almost closed. There was much damage to his armor, but he leaned close to the portal, eyes boring through the divide. "I have your scent now, Lorgar," growled the Ravenlord, his face contorted with monstrous rage. "I will find you, Lorgar. I will destroy you and every vessel you have filled with your taint." Lorgar staggered away, and the portal arch fell dull, leaving only bare stone within its pillars. "We can assemble a force in return, our lord," said Marduk, hurrying after the Primarch. "All is not lost," promised Kal'Ta'ar, not wishing to seem any less dedicated. "I will rebuild the Beneficta Diabola." Their entreaties continued as they followed Lorgar through the corridors and halls, heading towards the center of the grand construction spreading across their new capital of Sicarius. Stairs took them high, to the tower at the heart of everything. Black doors opened at Lorgar's approach as he strode within, no word uttered, no backward glance. With a noise that echoed in Kal'Ta'ar's soul as much as his ears, the doors slammed shut, leaving him and Marduk on the threshold. There was no handle, no keyhole, nothing by which they might open the edifice. A white Colchizian rune burned into life upon the door, and another. "Deny fate," read Kal'Ta'ar. He turned to the first acolyte. "What does that mean?" Okay, so Corvus and Lorgar are both way stronger now. The veneer of their humanity stripped away further as they become one with their true essence and their primordial selves, the warp gods they were crafted from. And they both seem to know this. Now, what I find funny is how Lorgar and Corax are both described as a literal warp storm. And Lorgar is known for having his crown of light, But when we see him tear out of the veneer of his flesh and ascend into his warped form, it is interesting that this being is dripping with glowing runes and sigils as his armor, essentially. We see a Lorgar that is not only of the warp, but a Lorgar that is the warp. He's one with it, a truly powerful transcendent being. But I don't think that he is prepared for his brother to be the same, in touch with the warp power that resides in and comprises all of the Primarchs. Did Lorgar lose so badly that he deserves the ridicule he gets from the community? No. Would he have lost and died were he to have continued the fight? Very possibly, yes. But the thing that really gets to me is after the descriptions of him being a warp-ascended being, and especially after the description of his halo of dark warp fronds, how people still can't wrap their head around how it was Lorgar who appeared in Hammer and Bolter Return to Cadia. I don't know. Is it just a fashion statement that regular demons wear fronds of light that shift into halos of dark warp fronds? I find frond to be quite a specific term, and yet the depicted demon on Return to Cadia does indeed have warp fronds. I'm sorry if it doesn't coincide with your personal narrative, but the demon in Return to Cadia is the demon Primarch Lorgar. All signs are there. No amount of piling on, dissing the argument, or bloated Brits bloviating on massive channels about how it isn't him will change the fact that Games Workshop has delivered, and no amount of gaslighting is going to make me stop seeing what is right in front of my eyes. People get too hung up on the Horus Heresy depiction of the Urizen, and need to embrace the fact that we've not seen him depicted in the 41st millennium yet, and what he became may not be in line with their vision, but it is absolutely badass nonetheless. Anyway, I strongly suggest that you judge Lorgar based on what the actual text says about him, and the last time we see him is in Shadow of the Past. So look at that amazing story. He didn't lose the fight like a bitch and run and is in hiding in the warp from Corvus. He did save his sons and lived to fight another day, and retreated to Sicarius where Corvus could not follow. And on the other side of the token, Corvus Corax did not stay outside Lorgar's door for 10,000 years to harass him. Corax can become something terrible in the warp. But we see him return to his regular superhuman form. He isn't entirely transcended, nor is he truly a demon as many suggest. What do you think? Is the Lorgar versus Corax fight misunderstood